Hello everyone. Welcome back to the fifth video of microservice architecture. In this video, we are going to look at emergence of microservices. Basically, why microservice architecture is useful, what are the benefits. First one, rapid adaptation to changes. One of the reasons for the microservice architecture now is the need to respond changes quickly. The software market is really competitive nowadays. If our product can't provide a future that is in high demand, it will lose the market share very quickly. And this is where microservices can split a large system into smaller parts. So we can upgrade, enhance individual parts in line with the market needs. Demand for high reliability. So, not only do we need to change parts of our system quickly, we also need to change them in a reliable way in order to keep the market happy. And microservices provide this reliability by having our system in many parts. So, one part of the system breaks, it won't break the entire system. Business aligned architecture. There is also need for business domain driven design. The architecture of our application needs to match the organization structure or the structure of business functions within the organization. So, if for example, accounts are having a massive overhaul of the software, we can just change the account service without affecting any other service related to the other department. You can see in the diagram there won't be any issue between the departments if one department decides to change the software because the software architecture matches the organization structure. Automated testing solutions. Another reason why microservice architecture is now possible because we now have automated testing tools. We have already seen that in a microservice architecture that our transactions are distributed and therefore a transaction will proceed processed by several services before it complete. Therefore, the integration between those services need to be tested and the testing these microservices together manually might be complex task. But the good news is there are automated testing tools. This test integration between our microservices and this is why microservice architecture is now possible because we have automated testing tools which test integration between the services. Streamed release and deployment tools. Release and deployment of microservices also be complex because remember we now have multiple services, that is multiple piece of software that we need to copy to the servers or onto the cloud, and it might be that for each service type we also have multiple instances that we need to operate at the same time. The good news is for release and deployment, we have tools, centralized tools which can carry out this function. Another reason why microservices moving parts is no longer an issue anymore is the fact that we can host them using high demand technology. We can basically request them like virtual machines in order to host our microservices on demand. We basically no longer need to deploy our services to physical servers. We can instead just have a server which provides a cloud or virtual machine. And we can basically just clone these virtual machines and say deploy our microservices on these virtual machines on demand, requesting them in the software without having to do any physical work in order to configure and deploy the services onto a new host. On demanding host, even now even more simpler with cloud services on the internet. You can now basically spin onto micro machine in the cloud without even owning the physical box and basically host your virtual machines with your microservices running in them in a cloud, which provides all the functionalities you need to manage and monitor your microservices. Another reason for need to adopt microservice architecture is the need to adopt new technologies because our system is now in a several moving parts. We can easily change one part, that is microservice, from one technology stack to another technology stack in order to get the competitive edge. Another advantage in technology which makes microservices possible is asynchronous communication technologies. In microservice architecture, when you use distributed transaction, the distributed transactions might use several services in order to complete. Using asynchronous communication, the distributed transaction does not have to wait for individual service to complete the task before it complete. We look at asynchronous communication technology in more detail in the technology module later on the videos. Another reason why microservice architecture are possible now is the fact that we have simpler server side and client side technology. There are number of technologies we can choose from both at server side and at the client side. And there are many open communication protocols which allow this server side and client side technology stack to work quite happily. Okay, let now highlight the key benefits of microservices. The one of the key benefits that microservices have shorter development times because the system is splits up into smaller moving parts. You can work on moving part individually. You can have teams working on different parts concurrently. And because microservices are smaller in size, they have a single focus and the team has less to worry about in terms of scope. They know the one thing they are working on the certain scope and there is no need to worry about the entire system as long as they honor the contracts between the services. And because the services are loosely coupled, developer can rework, change and deploy the individual components without deploying or affecting the entire system, and therefore deployment is more reliable and faster. Shorter deployment times and reliable and faster deployments also enable frequent updates. As we already briefly mentioned, frequent updates can give you competitive edge in the marketplace. The microservice architecture also allows us to decouple changeable parts. For example, if we know a UA for our system, a user interface for our system changes quite often. If it uses the microservice architecture, the UA is the most likely decoupled from all the services in the background, and therefore you can change it independently from all the services. Microservice architecture also increase security. In monolithic applications, you might have central database with one system accessing the database, and therefore all you need to do is hack the one system in order to gain access to the data. In microservice architecture, each microservice has its own database and each microservice can also have its own security mechanism, therefore making the data distributed and making the data even more secure. Microservice architecture also offer you increased time up because when it comes to upgrading the system, you will probably deploy one microservice at the time without affecting the rest of system. And because the system is splits into business domains and business functions, when a problem arises, we can provide quickly identify which service is responsible for the specific business function and therefore resolve the problem within the microservice. Microservice architecture also make the system highly scalable and it gives the system better performance. When there is a specific part of the system which is demand, we can just scale the specific part instead of scaling the whole system. So, for example, the inventory service in our example is in high demand. We can create many instances of the microservice without duplicating the entire system. We can also give the ownership of microservice to particular development team. So that there is a better ownership knowledge about the microservices. Basically called we can SMEs. For example, there are different microservices like logistics or purchasing. We can specify the SMEs according to this. I mean, for logistic, one SME, for purchasing, one SME, for order related issues, one SME, like that. We can also give the ownership of a microservice to particular development team. So there is a better ownership and knowledge about the microservice. We already briefly mentioned that microservice allow us to use right technology for specific parts in the system. And because each microservice is separated from other microservice, they don't share database and they have their own code base. You can easily have microservices being worked on concurrently by distributed teams. Okay, in this session of the module, we'll start looking, in upcoming session of modules, we'll start looking at the design principles that enable microservices and benefits that we get from microservices. Thanks for watching this video. We'll meet in the next videos.